For 5 years, I did exactly what a good husband was supposed to do. Every month, no matter what my bank account looked like, I sent $300 to my dead wife's mother. No reminders needed, no excuses accepted, just discipline. Because when your wife makes you promise something on her deathbed, you keep it, even if it costs you sleep, stability, or the quiet dignity of providing properly for your child. Lauren didn't ask for much before she died. She just squeezed my hand in that sterile hospital room in downtown Chicago, her voice barely above a whisper. Please don't let my mom struggle. So I didn't. I worked double shifts at the automotive plant. I skipped vacations my daughter begged for. I learned how to stretch groceries like my own mother did during the lean years, and I smiled through it when Maya asked why her birthdays always felt simple. 7 candles instead of the big party her friends got. Homemade cake instead of the fancy bakery ones with fondant flowers. Because we're practical people, I'd tell her, brushing her hair back. Your mom would have wanted it this way. Margaret Collins never thanked me. Not once. She never called to check on Maya, never asked how her granddaughter was handling the loss of her mother. She only sent short, clinical messages near the end of each month, like clockwork. Did you send it yet? Rent is due Friday. Don't forget. At first, I thought grief explained everything. People process loss differently. Some shut down. Some lash out. Some just disappear emotionally while their body keeps going through the motions. I told myself Margaret was probably drowning in her own pain, unable to reach out because acknowledging Maya would mean acknowledging what she'd lost. I made excuses for her coldness for years. Then the bank asked a question that cracked the entire illusion wide open. Mr. Harper, we're reviewing your refinance application. You have consistent monthly payments to a Margaret Collins. Our system flagged something unusual. Why does a 72-year-old retired woman need money that moves instantly, every single time you send it? I remember sitting in that loan officer's cubicle, the fluorescent lights humming overhead, paperwork spread across the desk between us. The question seemed innocent enough, routine due diligence. But something about it stuck in my throat. What do you mean, moves instantly? The loan officer, a young woman named Jennifer with kind eyes and careful words, hesitated. Within minutes of your transfer, sometimes seconds. The money forwards to another account, every time, for 5 years. That was the moment I realized something about grief nobody tells you. It doesn't just make you sad, it makes you obedient. And for 5 years, I had been obedient to something that was never real. Because my wife wasn't dead. She was alive. And she had been watching me suffer the entire time. The diagnosis came 3 weeks before Christmas. Lauren and I were in our small kitchen in Naperville, Illinois, wrapping presents for Maya's 5th birthday when she dropped the glass ornament she'd been holding. It shattered across the tile floor, red and gold fragments scattering like tiny warnings I was too naive to recognize. I'm fine, she said quickly, but her hands were trembling. She wasn't fine. The trembling had started months before, subtle enough that I'd convinced myself it was stress from her marketing job, from the chaos of raising a kindergartner, from life. But then came the fatigue, the mysterious bruising. The nights she'd wake up disoriented, unsure where she was. Dr. Rashid at Northwestern Memorial delivered the news with the kind of practiced gentleness that told me he'd done this too many times. It's an autoimmune condition, rare, aggressive. Her body is attacking itself at a cellular level. What's the prognosis? I asked, because that's what you say when your world is ending, but your mouth still remembers how to form questions. With treatment, we're looking at months. Maybe a year. I'm sorry. Lauren took it better than I did. She nodded, asked about pain management, about what to tell Maya. She was already planning her exit while I was still trying to process the entrance of this nightmare into our lives. The decline was swift. By February, she couldn't work. By March, she couldn't climb stairs without exhausting herself. By April, hospice had become part of our vocabulary, a word that sounds gentle but lands like a prison sentence. We moved her to the living room, set up a hospital bed by the window so she could see the maple tree in our front yard, watch it bud and bloom as she faded. Maya would sit beside her after school, reading picture books aloud while Lauren smiled and pretended she wasn't in agony. Margaret visited once. Just once. She stood in our doorway in May, clutching her purse like a shield, and I could see the resemblance between mother and daughter in the set of their jaws, the way they both looked away when emotions got too heavy. "Mom," Lauren whispered. "Baby." Margaret's voice cracked. "You should have told me sooner." "I didn't want you to worry." They spoke in low tones while I made coffee nobody would drink. When Margaret left 2 hours later, her face was stone. No tears, no embraces, just a stiff pat on Lauren's hand and a nod in my direction. "Take care of her," was all she said. The end came on a Wednesday in June. Lauren had been slipping in and out of consciousness for days, the morphine keeping her comfortable but distant. Maya was at my sister's house. I couldn't let her see her mother like this. Couldn't let her final memory be this shell of the woman who used to dance with her in the kitchen. I sat beside the bed, holding Lauren's hand. The hospice nurse had stepped out to give us privacy, that particular kind of privacy that means someone's about to die. Lauren's eyes fluttered open. Clear. Present. Like God had given her one last moment of lucidity to say what needed saying. "Daniel. I'm here, baby. I'm right here. Promise me something." Her grip tightened. "My mom. She's going to be alone. Promise me you'll help her." My throat closed. "Lauren. Promise me. Please. She doesn't have anyone else. Just send her something every month, enough so she doesn't worry, so she can live with dignity." I would have promised her anything in that moment. Would have sworn to move mountains, to stop the sun from setting, to bring her back from wherever she was going. "I promise. I'll take care of her." She smiled, actually smiled. "You're a good man, Daniel Harper. Maya's lucky to have you." Those were the last words my wife ever said to me. She died 6 hours later while I was in the bathroom splashing cold water on my face, trying to remember how to breathe. The nurse found me standing at the sink, staring at my reflection, wondering how a person could look so normal when everything inside them had just shattered. The funeral was small. Margaret sat in the front pew beside me, her face hidden behind a black veil, shaking silently. After the burial at Oakwood Cemetery, she pulled me aside while everyone else headed to the reception. "You'll keep your promise?" she asked. "Of course. $300 a month. That's what she wanted. That's what I'll need." I nodded, too numb to question the specificity. "I'll set up a transfer, first of every month." "Good." She patted my arm once, mechanical. "Lauren raised you right." Then she got into a taxi and disappeared toward O'Hare, leaving me standing in a cemetery with my daughter's small hand in mine, wondering how I was supposed to explain to a 5-year-old that her mother wasn't coming home. The first payment went through on July 1st. I sat at my laptop in the quiet of early morning, Maya still asleep upstairs, and transferred $300 to Margaret Collins's account. It felt ceremonial somehow, like lighting a candle in church or laying flowers on a grave. A tangible way to honor the promise I'd made to the woman I loved. The confirmation email arrived seconds later. Transaction complete. I stared at my checking account balance. The number had dropped from barely comfortable to concerning, but that was fine. I'd pick up overtime. I'd make it work. I always made it work. By August, the payment had become routine. Wake up, make coffee, transfer money, go to work, come home, help Maya with homework, collapse into bed, repeat. Margaret sent a text on August 3rd. Got it. Thanks. That was the entirety of our communication. September brought the first real squeeze. Maya needed new shoes. Her feet had grown over the summer, and the school supply list was longer than I'd budgeted for. I juggled the numbers, moved money around, and made the payment on time. Margaret's text. Received. October, November, December. The months blurred together, each one marked by that first-of-the-month ritual. The mortgage, utilities, groceries, Maya's needs, and Margaret's $300. Always Margaret's $300. Christmas was hard. Maya wanted a bicycle, a real one, not a hand-me-down from a neighbor or a garage sale find, something new and shiny that would make her feel like other kids. I worked every overtime shift the plant offered in December. Came home smelling like motor oil and exhaustion, kissed my daughter goodnight, and counted dollars like prayer beads. She got the bicycle. A purple one with streamers on the handlebars and a basket in front. Her face when she saw it Christmas morning made every extra hour worth it. Margaret's text on January 1st. It's the new year, don't forget. I hadn't forgotten. I never forgot. The second year was harder than the first. The grief had settled into something chronic rather than acute, but the financial pressure had intensified. My car needed repairs. The furnace broke in February. Maya got sick and needed urgent care because our insurance deductible was astronomical. I picked up a weekend job at a hardware store in downtown Naperville. Worked 40 hours at the plant, 16 at the store, and whatever was left went to being Maya's father. Margaret never called, never texted except to confirm receipt of the money or remind me when it was late by even a day. Where's the payment? She'd text at 8 a.m. on the 2nd if I hadn't transferred it by midnight on the 1st. Sent it at 6 a.m., I'd reply. Got it. That was the extent of our relationship. Financial transactions and mechanical confirmations. By year 3, I'd stopped hoping she'd ask about Maya. Stopped expecting birthday cards or Christmas calls or any acknowledgement that she had a granddaughter who looked exactly like Lauren, who had her mother's laugh and her stubborn streak and her gift for drawing. Maya asked about her grandmother once, sitting at the kitchen table doing homework. Does Grandma Margaret know I made honor roll? I paused, my hands in soapy dishwater. I'm sure she'd be proud. But does she know? I'll tell her. I lied. Maya nodded, satisfied, and went back to her math problems. I sent Margaret a text that night with a photo of Maya's report card. She never responded. The 4th year brought a different kind of exhaustion, not physical. I'd adapted to the extra hours, the constant hustle, but something deeper. A soul tiredness that came from giving and giving and giving to someone who seemed incapable of gratitude or reciprocation. I thought about stopping, about breaking the promise. But then I'd remember Lauren's face in those final moments, the way she'd grip my hand like I was the only solid thing left in her dissolving world. I'd remember her last words, "You're a good man." So I kept paying, kept honoring the commitment, kept being the man Lauren believed I was. By year 5, it wasn't even a conscious decision anymore. It was muscle memory, automatic. On the 1st of every month, I transferred $300 to Margaret Collins and received her 2-word confirmation in return. 60 payments, $18,000. 5 years of keeping a promise to a ghost. And then, in March of that 5th year, I walked into First National Bank to refinance my mortgage, and Jennifer Martinez asked me a question that would unravel everything. Why does a retired woman need money that moves instantly every single time? I should have asked more questions from the beginning. That's the thought that haunted me after Jennifer's question planted itself in my mind like a splinter. Why hadn't I wondered why Margaret never wanted to video chat? Why she always had excuses when I suggested bringing Maya to visit? The trip's too long for an old woman. I don't do well with travel anymore. Maybe when she's older. I'd accepted every deflection because grief had made me passive. Made me believe that respecting someone's boundaries was the same as being supportive. The day after my mortgage appointment, I sat in my truck outside the plant during lunch break and scrolled through 5 years of text messages with Margaret. They were all identical in tone. Transactional, cold, perfunctory. Not once had she asked how I was holding up. Not once had she mentioned Maya by name. I called my sister Rachel that night after Maya went to bed. "Did you ever think Margaret was off?" I asked. Rachel was quiet for a moment. She'd been at the funeral, had seen the stiff interactions, the emotional distance. I thought she was just grieving differently. Why? I don't know. Something's bothering me. Daniel, you've been carrying this burden for 5 years. It's okay to feel resentful. That doesn't make you a bad person. But it wasn't resentment. It was something else. Something formless and unsettling that I couldn't name yet. I started paying attention to details I'd ignored before. Margaret's texts always came from the same number, but I'd never called it. I tried once, Thursday evening at 6. It rang 4 times and went to a generic voicemail. "You've reached the voicemail box of," followed by the number, not her name. I hung up without leaving a message. On Saturday, I was cleaning out old files and found the folder from Lauren's estate. Bank statements, insurance documents, the deed to the house we'd bought together, and tucked in the back, a copy of Margaret's lease agreement from 5 years ago. Address, 847 Riverside Drive, Cleveland, OH 44113. I looked it up on Google Maps, a modest apartment building near the waterfront. Reviews mentioned it was affordable housing for seniors, mostly subsidized. Why would someone in subsidized housing need $300 extra every month? I tried to push the thought away. Maybe she had medical expenses. Maybe her social security wasn't enough. There were 100 reasonable explanations, but Jennifer's question kept circling back. The money moves instantly, every time. That wasn't the behavior of someone paying bills or buying groceries. That was the behavior of someone forwarding money. But to whom? For what? On Monday, I called Margaret's number again. This time it went straight to voicemail, like the phone had been turned off. I sent a text. "Hey Margaret, just checking in, how are you?" 3 hours later. "Fine." "Why?" "Just wanted to make sure you're okay. Maya's spring break is coming up. Thought we might visit Cleveland." The response took 20 minutes, which was unusual. Margaret always replied within seconds of receiving the money confirmations. "Not a good time. I'm dealing with some health issues, maybe in the summer." I stared at the message. Health issues she'd never mentioned before. Another deflection. "What kind of health issues? Do you need help?" "Nothing serious, just need rest." I didn't believe her. That night, I made a decision that would have seemed paranoid if it hadn't turned out to be completely justified. I logged into the bank's online portal and looked at the detailed transaction history for every payment I'd made to Margaret Collins. Each one showed the same pattern. Transfer initiated, 12:01 a.m., transfer completed, 12:02 a.m., funds withdrawn, 12:15 a.m. Every single time the money left her account within 15 minutes of arriving. I called the bank's customer service line. "Hi, I'm trying to understand a transaction pattern. If someone receives a transfer and immediately withdraws it, would that show up in transaction history? The representative was helpful but cautious. If they withdraw cash, yes. If they transfer it to another account, that would show as an outgoing transfer. But I'd need to look at the specific account to give you accurate information. What if someone's account is just a pass-through, like they're not actually using the money themselves? There was a pause. Sir, are you concerned about fraud? I don't know. Maybe. I'd recommend speaking with a branch manager. They can do a more thorough review if you have documentation showing a pattern of concern. I thanked her and hung up, my hands shaking. Fraud. The word felt like ice water in my veins. Lauren wouldn't have asked me to support a fraud scheme. She couldn't have known. She'd been dying, vulnerable, worried about her mother's future. Unless... No. I pushed the thought away before it could fully form. But it came back later that night when I was lying in bed staring at the ceiling, a terrible, impossible question that I couldn't unthink once it had entered my mind. What if Margaret wasn't the one receiving the money? What if someone else was? And what if Lauren had known exactly who that someone was? Marcus Bennett and I had been friends since college. We'd played basketball together at DePaul, stayed close through marriages and careers, and ended up living 20 minutes apart in the western suburbs. He worked as a fraud analyst at Chase Bank, one of those jobs that sounds boring until you realize he spent his days uncovering million-dollar scams. I texted him Tuesday morning. Need a favor. It's important. Court or coffee? He replied immediately. Coffee, the serious kind. We met at a diner in Downers Grove, one of those places with worn vinyl booths and coffee that tasted like it had been brewing since the Clinton administration. Marcus slid into the seat across from me, already knowing something was wrong. You look like hell, he said. I need you to look at something. Unofficially. His expression shifted. This was the face he wore at work, the one that evaluated risk and calculated probabilities. How unofficial? I pulled out my phone and showed him the transaction history I'd screenshotted. 5 years of identical patterns. Money in, money out. Like clockwork. Marcus studied the images for a long time, swiping through them slowly, his jaw tightening with each screen. Where's this money going? He asked finally. That's what I need you to find out. Can you? Daniel, if this is what I think it is, just tell me, please. He sighed and pulled out his laptop. This is going to take me a few days. I'll need to run some queries, cross-reference patterns. But if the money's moving through multiple accounts, if there's a network involved, I'll find it. A network? This pattern, immediate transfers, consistent timing, never any variance. This is what we call structuring. It's how people hide money trails. They move funds through multiple accounts to obscure the origin or destination. Why would someone do that? Marcus looked at me with something like pity. Fraud, usually. Money laundering. Sometimes it's just someone trying to hide assets from creditors or spouses during a divorce. But in your case, given the amounts and the time frame... He trailed off. What? This looks like someone's been using you as a funding source for something else, and they've been very careful about covering their tracks. The coffee in my stomach turned to acid. I've been sending this money for 5 years because my wife asked me to, because she was dying and wanted to make sure her mother was taken care of. I know, man, I know. Marcus closed his laptop. Give me until Friday. I'll have answers. Friday came faster and slower than any week of my life. I went through the motions, work, dinner with Maya, helping with homework, but my mind was elsewhere. Calculating, questioning, dreading. Marcus called at 7 p.m. You sitting down? I was pacing my living room, but I sat. Tell me. The money goes to Margaret Collins's account. That part's true. But within minutes, it's transferred to an account at a credit union in northern Ohio. That account is under the name Lauren M. Harper. The room tilted. That's impossible. Lauren's dead. The account was opened 6 years ago. It's been active this entire time. Regular deposits, regular withdrawals. Whoever's operating it is alive and well. I couldn't breathe. Literally couldn't pull air into my lungs. Daniel. You there? Someone stole her identity. That has to be it. Someone opened an account using her information after she died. That's what I thought too. So I dug deeper. The account has biometric verification for withdrawals, fingerprint authentication at ATMs, facial recognition for mobile deposits. So it's not identity theft, it's the actual person. That's impossible, I said again, but my voice had no conviction behind it. There's more. I pulled location data for the ATM withdrawals. Most of them are in Cleveland, concentrated around a specific neighborhood. Some are in Columbus, a few in Detroit. But here's the thing that made me call you immediately. What? Last week there was a withdrawal in Naperville, 3 blocks from your house. The phone nearly slipped from my hand. That's not possible. I'm sending you the address where most of the Cleveland withdrawals happen. 847 Riverside Drive, apartment 304. You should probably go there. But Daniel, his voice got quieter. If this is what I think it is, you need to prepare yourself. This isn't just fraud. This is something worse. After we hung up, I sat in the dark living room for an hour, watching headlights sweep across the walls as cars passed outside. Maya was upstairs doing a video call with her friends, her laughter drifting down like echoes from a different universe, where fathers didn't discover that their dead wives might not be dead. I pulled up the address Marcus had sent. The same apartment building from Margaret's lease agreement. The same place Lauren had supposedly moved her mother into after her father died. I booked a flight to Cleveland for the next morning. I didn't tell anyone where I was going. I didn't know what I'd find when I got there. But I knew, with the kind of certainty that settles in your bones like winter cold, that nothing in my life would ever be the same again. The flight from O'Hare to Cleveland Hopkins took 90 minutes, but it felt like traveling to another dimension. I'd left Maya with Rachel, told her I had a work thing, watched my sister's eyes narrow with concern but not press for details. I rented a car at the airport and drove through the city in midday traffic, following GPS directions to a neighborhood I'd never visited in person, despite sending money there for 5 years. 847 Riverside Drive was a 6-story brick building with faded awnings and small balconies cluttered with dead plants and storage bins. The kind of place where people lived because it was affordable, not because it was charming. A laundromat occupied the ground floor corner, an insurance office next to it. I parked across the street and just stared at the building for 20 minutes. Somewhere in there, the truth was waiting. The truth that would either confirm my wife was really dead and I'd been funding some elaborate fraud scheme, or the truth that was so much worse I couldn't even let myself think it fully. Finally, I got out of the car. The lobby smelled like old carpet and cleaning chemicals. A directory on the wall listed apartment numbers but no names. Mailboxes lined one wall, most of them stuffed with junk mail and flyers. I found the building manager's office on the first floor. A woman in her 50s looked up from her computer, her expression shifting from bored to professional in an instant. "Help you?" "I'm looking for information about a tenant. Margaret Collins, apartment 304. She frowned. "We don't give out tenant information." "I'm her son-in-law. I've been sending her money, but I haven't been able to reach her, and I'm worried." The frown deepened. "Margaret Collins hasn't lived here in 4 years." The floor dropped out from under me. "What?" "She broke her lease in March 2021. Said she was moving in with family in Florida. That's impossible. I've been sending money to her at this address. The manager's expression shifted to something between suspicion and concern. Well, someone's been picking up mail, but the lease has been under a different name since 2021. What name? She hesitated, weighing privacy policies against the obvious distress on my face. Lauren Harper. I had to grip the edge of her desk to stay upright. Can you show me security footage from the past few months? Sir, I really can't, please. My wife died 5 years ago. Her name is Lauren Harper. If someone's using her identity, I need to know if she's... I couldn't finish the sentence. The woman studied my face for a long moment, then sighed. Wait here. She disappeared into a back room and returned with a laptop. This is against policy, but you look like you're about to pass out. I'm going to show you 30 seconds of footage from last week. That's it. She pulled up a video file and hit play. The screen showed the building's lobby. Timestamp, April 3rd, 2:47 p.m. A woman entered from the street checking her mailbox. She was thinner than I remembered. Her hair was cut shorter, darker. She wore jeans and a plain sweater. Nothing distinctive. But I would have known her anywhere. The way she moved. The slight favor of her left foot where she'd broken her ankle in college. The gesture she made brushing hair behind her ear. Lauren, my wife, alive. The video continued for 15 more seconds. She collected her mail, glanced at her phone, and headed toward the elevator. The doors closed and she disappeared. Is that your wife? The manager asked quietly. I couldn't speak, couldn't nod, could only stare at the frozen frame on the screen. I need to see that apartment. I can't let you into a tenant's unit without their permission. She's my wife. We're still legally married. I have rights. Sir, please. The word came out broken. I've been paying for her to live here for 5 years while she let me think she was dead. While I raised our daughter alone, while I worked myself to exhaustion, please. The manager looked at me for a long time. Then she stood and pulled a keyring from a drawer. If anyone asks, I let you in to retrieve your property from when she was Margaret Collins's subtenant. 5 minutes. That's all I'm giving you. We rode the elevator to the 3rd floor in silence. My heart was hammering so hard I thought I might pass out. The hallway was narrow, painted a institutional beige, smelling like cooking spices and old building. Apartment 304 was at the end. The manager unlocked the door and stepped aside. 5 minutes. I walked into my dead wife's apartment. It was small. A studio with a kitchenette, a Murphy bed folded into the wall, a desk covered in papers. Impersonal in the way places are when someone doesn't want to leave traces. No photos, no decorations, just functional furniture and the bare minimum of existence. I walked to the desk, bills in Lauren Harper's name, a laptop I didn't recognize. A planner open to this week with notations I couldn't decipher from where I stood. The bathroom had basic toiletries. The closet held clothes in her size. This wasn't a fraud. This wasn't identity theft. This was a life. My wife had been living here, breathing here, existing here, while I told our daughter bedtime stories about how Mommy was watching from heaven. I heard the elevator ding down the hall, footsteps approaching. Mr. Harper, we need to go, the manager said from the doorway. But I was rooted to the spot, staring at a calendar on the wall. April was marked with appointments, errands, normal mundane life things that dead people don't do. The footsteps got closer. The manager's expression changed. That might be her. We need to leave now. She grabbed my arm and pulled me toward the door, but I resisted. I needed to see her. Needed to look into her eyes and ask why. Needed her to explain how she could do this. The footsteps stopped outside the apartment. The door was still open, and there she was. Lauren, my wife, standing in the hallway holding a grocery bag, her keys in her other hand, her face going completely white as she saw me. Daniel. The word fell between us like a bomb. We stared at each other across the threshold of the apartment, me inside her secret life, her frozen in the doorway of what should have been her grave. "You're dead," I said. The words sounded stupid coming out of my mouth. Obviously, she wasn't dead. She was standing right there in flesh and blood and a blue sweater I'd never seen before. Lauren's face crumpled, not with sadness, with something worse, calculation. "You shouldn't be here." "I shouldn't—" The words choked off. 5 years of grief and sacrifice and lies compressed into a pressure behind my sternum that felt like it would crack my ribs. "You're dead. I watched you die. I buried you. Mr. Harper, we really need to go," the building manager said, her hand still on my arm. But I couldn't move, couldn't process. My wife, my dead wife, was alive and annoyed that I'd shown up at her apartment. Lauren stepped inside and closed the door, shutting out the manager. Now it was just the two of us in this sterile studio that smelled nothing like the home we'd shared, the life we'd built. "How did you find me?" Her voice was different, flatter, like she'd spent 5 years practicing how to remove emotion from her tone. "Your mother's bank account, the patterns. A friend helped me trace it." I was shaking now, adrenaline flooding my system. "How could you do this? How could you let me think?" "Maya thinks you're dead, Lauren. Your daughter thinks her mother died." Something flickered across her face then. Regret, maybe. Or just discomfort at being confronted with consequences. It was the only way. The only way to do what? Escape your family? Escape responsibility? What could possibly justify this? She set the grocery bag down on the counter, moving with careful deliberation, like she was giving herself time to construct an answer. "You wouldn't understand. Try me. I was suffocating in that life, in that house, being your wife, being her mother, being what everyone expected me to be. I couldn't breathe." The words landed like physical blows. "So you faked your death? You put me through 5 years of hell? You let our daughter grow up without a mother because you were what? Bored? Suffocated?" "It wasn't about you. It was entirely about me. About Maya. You made me promise to take care of your mother, knowing I'd send money, knowing she'd forward it to you. You turned me into your personal ATM while you what? Found yourself." Lauren's jaw tightened. "I gave you everything for 6 years. Every piece of myself. It was my turn to exist on my own terms. You had a child. You don't get to just opt out of that because you're having an identity crisis. Don't talk to me about what I get to do. You have no idea what it was like, being swallowed whole by motherhood, by marriage, by expectations. I was disappearing and nobody noticed because I was too busy being convenient. So you made yourself dead instead." I laughed, a sound with no humor in it. "How did you even do it? The hospital, the doctors, the death certificate?" She looked away. "Mom knew someone, a nurse. We faked the medical records, the death certification. It's easier than you'd think if you know who to pay. Margaret was in on it from the beginning. She understood. She knew what it was like to lose yourself in a life that wasn't really yours." I thought about all those cold texts, all those transactional interactions. Margaret hadn't been grieving. She'd been helping her daughter hide. Where is she now? Your mother? Florida. Actually, Florida. She moved there 2 years ago once things were stable. Once we knew the plan was working. The plan? You had a plan to defraud your husband while your daughter grew up thinking her mother was dead. I left you the house, the insurance money, everything you needed. I needed my wife. Maya needed her mother. She's better off without me. You both are. The words hung in the air between us, so monstrous I couldn't immediately process them. You actually believe that? Lauren's expression hardened. I know it. I was a terrible mother. I resented every moment, every crying fit, every demand, every sacrifice. She deserves better than someone who was only pretending to love being her mom. You weren't pretending. I saw you with her. You loved her. I loved the idea of her, the Instagram version, the few minutes when she was cute and quiet and easy, but the reality, the constant need, the identity death, the way I stopped being Lauren and became just Maya's mom. I hated it, Daniel. I hated all of it. I stared at this woman who looked like my wife, but sounded like a stranger. What was even real? Any of it? She had the decency to look away. Some of it, in the beginning. But by the time Maya was born, I already knew I'd made a mistake. I just didn't know how to fix it without destroying everything. So you destroyed it anyway, just slower, crueler. I gave you 5 years to adjust, to build a life without me, to let Maya's memory of me fade into something soft and painless. In another 5 years, she won't even really remember what I looked like. The casual cruelty of it broke something in me. Get out, I said. This is my apartment. Get out of our lives, Maya's and mine. You don't get to come back from this. You don't get to decide someday that you want to be her mother again. You're dead. You stay dead. Lauren's expression flickered. I was never planning to come back. Good. Because if you try, I'll make sure everyone knows what you did. The fraud, the fake death, all of it. You'll go to prison. You'd do that? Destroy Maya's image of her dead mother? You already did that. I'm just making sure the destruction stays contained. I walked to the door, my hands shaking so hard I could barely grip the handle. Daniel! I stopped but didn't turn around. I'm sorry, for what it's worth. I'm sorry I wasn't strong enough to be what you needed. You weren't sorry enough to tell me the truth. You weren't sorry enough to stop taking my money. You're just sorry you got caught. I walked out and didn't look back. I should have gone straight home, should have gotten on a plane, hugged my daughter and tried to figure out how to move forward with the shattered pieces of my understanding of reality. Instead, I went to the police. The Cleveland Police Department's fraud division was located in a squat building downtown that smelled like burnt coffee and bureaucracy. I sat across from Detective Sarah Morrison, a woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and a notepad covered in shorthand. Let me make sure I understand, she said after I'd told her everything. Your wife faked her death 5 years ago, convinced you she was dying, got you to promise to support her mother, and has been using those payments to fund her new life. Yes. And her mother was complicit in the scheme. Yes. She's in Florida now. I have her contact information. Detective Morrison leaned back in her chair. This is fraud. Identity fraud, wire fraud, potentially insurance fraud if she collected any death benefits. But Mr. Harper, I have to tell you, prosecuting this is going to be complicated. Why? Because she's your wife. You're still legally married, and any defense attorney worth their salt is going to argue that payments between spouses aren't fraud, they're domestic support, even if you thought she was dead. The bottom dropped out of my hope for justice. So she just gets away with it? I didn't say that. I said it's complicated. But here's what bothers me about your case. She pulled out a file from her desk. 3 months ago, we opened an investigation into a series of similar cases. People supporting dead relatives who turned out to be alive. Faked deaths, fake medical records, elaborate schemes to extract ongoing payments. Your wife might not be working alone. My breath caught. What do you mean? I mean, this might be bigger than one woman faking her death. There might be a network. People who facilitate these schemes for a cut of the profits. She pulled out photos. Documents. I saw names I didn't recognize. Faces of people who looked normal, unremarkable. Could have been anyone. This is Margaret Collins, Morrison said, tapping one photo. Your mother-in-law. She shows up in connection with 2 other cases we're investigating, both involving faked deaths, both involving ongoing payment schemes. The room tilted again. She's done this before? We think so. The woman who helped fake your wife's death certificate? She's connected to 11 other fraudulent death certificates we've uncovered. The attorney who handled your wife's estate, he's under investigation for his role in 4 similar schemes. How many people are involved? At least 20 that we can connect directly, but the network might be larger. These schemes have been operating for at least a decade. People fake their deaths, their accomplices help them disappear, and family members fund their new lives thinking they're honoring promises to the dead. I felt sick. How much money are we talking about? Millions. Across all the cases. Most victims don't figure it out because they're too loyal, too committed to the promise they made. You got lucky. Your friend at the bank noticed the pattern. Lucky isn't the word I'd use. Morrison's expression softened. I know this is devastating. But you're giving us the break we need to take down the whole operation. With your testimony, with the evidence you've already gathered, we can make arrests. We can stop them from doing this to anyone else. What about Lauren? What happens to her? If she's part of the network, she'll be charged. If she was just a victim who got pulled into a scheme, that'll come out in the investigation. But either way, Mr. Harper, she committed fraud. Multiple counts. She's looking at prison time. The thought of Lauren in prison should have felt like justice. Instead, it just felt like more loss, more destruction, more proof that the life I'd thought I was living had never existed. What do you need from me? Everything. Bank records, communication logs, the address where you found her. I'll need you to make a statement. And Mr. Harper, she looked at me seriously, don't contact your wife again. Don't warn her. If she runs, we lose our chance to catch the others. I won't. And you should tell your daughter, before she hears it somewhere else. That was the part I'd been avoiding thinking about. How do you tell a 10-year-old that her dead mother is actually alive but chose to abandon her? How do you explain that kind of betrayal without destroying her ability to trust anyone ever again? I will, when I get home. Morrison walked me out, her card pressed into my hand with instructions to call any time, day or night. This isn't your fault, she said at the door. I know it feels like you should have seen something, should have known, but these people are professionals. They're good at what they do. You were a victim, not an accomplice. I drove back to the airport in a daze. The streets of Cleveland passed by like scenery from someone else's life. I kept expecting to wake up, to discover this was some extended nightmare brought on by grief and exhaustion. But the flight was real. The drive home from O'Hare was real. Walking into Rachel's house to pick up Maya was real. Dad! She ran to me, her arms wrapping around my waist in a hug that felt like the only honest thing left in the world. How was your work thing? I looked at Rachel over Maya's head. My sister's expression was knowing, concerned, waiting. It was complicated, baby. We need to have a talk when we get home. Maya pulled back, reading my face with the intuition kids have. Is something wrong? We'll talk at home, okay? She nodded, uncertain, and gathered her overnight bag. On the drive home, she chattered about her day, about a science project at school, about her friend's birthday party next weekend. Normal kid things from a normal kid life that was about to get very not normal. I gripped the steering wheel and tried to figure out how to tell my daughter that her mother's love had been a lie without making her believe all love was a lie. I still haven't figured it out. Detective Morrison called 6 days later. "We're making arrests tomorrow. I wanted you to know. Your wife, Margaret Collins. 3 others connected to the network. We've been building the case quietly, and we have enough now to move forward." "Okay." The word came out hollow. "There's something else. Lauren agreed to cooperate. She's willing to testify against the others in exchange for a reduced sentence." Of course she was. Even in her own destruction, Lauren was looking for the easy way out. What does that mean for her? Probably 3 to 5 years instead of 10 to 15. She'll be charged with fraud, conspiracy, and identity theft. But with cooperation and first offense consideration, she might serve less. And Margaret? She's looking at 10 years minimum. She's been running this operation for over a decade. She's the one who connected desperate people with falsified documents, who facilitated the disappearances, who managed the money laundering network. Your wife was just one of many. It was strange how that detail hurt differently than all the others. Lauren hadn't even been special in her betrayal. She'd been just another customer in her mother's scheme to profit from people's love and loyalty. "There's one more thing," Morrison said. "We'd like you to participate in a controlled meeting with Lauren. She's agreed to it. We'll record everything. Her confession in your presence will strengthen the case against the others. It's entirely voluntary, but it would help. You want me to sit across from her and listen to her explain why she destroyed our lives? I know it's a lot to ask, but sometimes victims need that closure. And sometimes testimony from these confrontations is what puts the right people in prison." I thought about Maya, who still didn't know the full truth, who I'd told a gentler version. Mommy wasn't really sick. She left because she wasn't ready to be a mom. But it had nothing to do with you. You're perfect. She'd cried for hours, asked questions I couldn't answer. Did I do something wrong? Did she not love me? She loved you the best she could, but some people aren't capable of loving the way they should. Now Morrison was offering me a chance to look Lauren in the eyes one more time, with federal agents present and recording equipment running, to hear her explain in her own words what she'd done and why. I'll do it. The meeting was arranged for a conference room at the FBI field office in downtown Chicago. Lauren was brought in wearing street clothes, jeans and a sweater, the same casual uniform she'd worn to buy groceries in Cleveland. She looked smaller somehow, diminished. We sat across from each other at a utilitarian table. 2 agents stood by the door. A recording device sat between us, a red light blinking to show it was active. "Hi, Daniel," Lauren said quietly. "Don't." I kept my voice flat. "Don't try to make this personal." "Okay." Detective Morrison sat at the head of the table. "Mrs. Harper, you've agreed to provide a full statement regarding the fraud scheme you participated in from 2019 to 2024. Please state for the record what your involvement was and who else participated." Lauren looked at me, then away. Then she started talking. She explained how Margaret had approached her after Maya was born, when Lauren was drowning in postpartum depression and resentment. How Margaret had told her about other women who'd escaped their lives with her help. How Lauren had initially refused, but as the years went on and the suffocation got worse, she'd started planning. "We set it up over 6 months," she said. "Found the nurse who'd falsify records, set up the bank accounts, created the illness narrative, decided on the timeline. And you were fine with what that would do to your husband? To your daughter?" Lauren's eyes filled with tears. "I wasn't thinking about them. I was only thinking about surviving, about getting out." "You weren't surviving. You were comfortable. You were loved. You had a family. I was dying inside that family, Daniel. Every day felt like drowning. Then you should have gotten therapy. You should have gotten divorced. You should have done literally anything except fake your death and let your child grow up thinking her mother was dead. I know it was wrong, but I couldn't see any other way out. Because you didn't look for one. The agents let us go back and forth for nearly an hour. Lauren cried. I stayed cold. She explained how the money worked, how Margaret distributed it, how the network operated, names and details that would help put away the others involved. But she never gave me what I actually needed, a reason that made sense, an explanation that would let me reconcile the woman I'd married with the woman who'd committed this elaborate betrayal. Do you want to know about Maya? I asked finally. About your daughter? Lauren's face crumpled. How is she? Destroyed, confused, asking questions I can't answer like, why wasn't I enough to make Mommy stay? Tell her. I'm not telling her anything from you. You're dead to her. You stay dead. That's the only kindness you have left to give. Lauren sobbed openly now, and I felt nothing. 5 years ago, her tears would have devastated me. Now they were just water and salt, biologically programmed responses that meant nothing. Morrison ended the interview after 90 minutes. They had what they needed, enough for charges, convictions, prison sentences. As Lauren was led out, she looked back once. I'm sorry, Daniel. For whatever it's worth, I'm sorry. It's not worth anything, but I hope someday you become someone who would never do this to another person. I hope you learn what love actually requires. The door closed behind her. It was the last time I ever saw my wife. The trial took place over 2 weeks in federal court in downtown Cleveland. I sat in the gallery with 10 other victims, people who'd been funding dead loved ones for years, their loyalty weaponized against them by Margaret Collins's network. The prosecution laid out the scheme in detail, charts showing money flow, testimony from the nurse who'd falsified death certificates, evidence of 19 separate cases over 12 years, nearly $3 million stolen from grieving families. Margaret Collins showed no remorse. She sat at the defense table stone-faced, occasionally whispering to her attorney, treating the whole proceeding like an inconvenient business meeting. Lauren testified against her, explained how the system worked, how people were recruited, how desperation was exploited. Her voice shook, but she answered every question. The jury watched her with expressions ranging from disgust to pity. When it was my turn to testify, I kept it simple. Told them about the promise I'd made to my dying wife, the 5 years of payments, the discovery, the confrontation. I didn't cry or rail against injustice. I just stated facts. The defense tried to paint Lauren as a victim, a woman with mental health issues manipulated by her controlling mother. The prosecution countered with evidence of premeditation, of Lauren's active participation in planning her own fake death. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. Margaret Collins, guilty on all counts, 22 years in federal prison. Lauren Harper, guilty on conspiracy and fraud charges, sentenced to 4 years with credit for cooperation. 3 other network members received sentences ranging from 5 to 15 years. The day after the sentencing, I took Maya to Navy Pier in Chicago. We rode the Ferris wheel and ate too much ice cream and watched boats on Lake Michigan. She was quieter than usual, processing everything in the way 10-year-olds do, in pieces, in questions that came at unexpected moments. Do you still love her? Maya asked, as we sat on a bench watching the sunset. I love who I thought she was, the person I married, but that person might never have existed. That's sad. Yeah, baby. It is. Do you think she loved me? Really loved me? Not just pretended? I pulled her close. I think she loved you as much as she was capable of loving anyone. But some people's capacity for love is smaller than it should be. That's not your fault. That's not a reflection on you. That's about her limitations, not your worth. Maya nodded against my shoulder. I'm glad I have you. I'm glad I have you too. Over the following months, we built a new kind of normal. Therapy helped, both individual and family sessions. Maya needed space to process the betrayal and confusion. I needed help managing the anger and shame that came in waves. The shame was the hardest part. Shame that I'd been fooled so completely, that I'd worked myself to exhaustion for a lie, that I'd let loyalty blind me to obvious signs. But my therapist reframed it. You weren't fooled. You were loving. There's a difference. Being loyal and trusting doesn't make you stupid. It makes you human. The people who exploited that are the ones who should feel shame, not you. Slowly the weight began to lift. I stopped working overtime, spent more evenings at home with Maya. We cooked dinner together, watched movies, talked about her day at school, simple things that had gotten lost in the grind of survival. Rachel helped fill some of the gaps, showing up for dance recitals and school events, being the maternal presence Maya needed. My mother flew out from Atlanta and stayed for 2 weeks, cooking and cleaning and just being present in that way mothers are. Marcus and I played basketball again, both of us older and slower but still competitive. He never said, "I told you so," about the financial patterns he'd uncovered, just showed up and was a friend. I even started dating again, tentatively, nervously, with the caution of someone who'd learned that people aren't always who they claim to be. A woman named Teresa from Maya's school's parent committee. We got coffee a few times. She knew my story. Everyone in town did after the trial made the news, and she didn't treat me like damaged goods. "You're someone who keeps his promises," she said on our 3rd date. "That's rare. Don't let what happened make you believe otherwise." The money, what little I'd saved over the years, went toward Maya's college fund. What Margaret and Lauren had stolen was gone, recovered by the feds, but tied up in restitution to multiple victims. I'd see some of it back eventually, but I wasn't counting on it. What mattered was that Maya was okay, that she was learning that love wasn't about grand gestures or perfect people. It was about showing up, staying present, being honest, even when it hurt. On the 5-year anniversary of Lauren's death, the real anniversary this time, the day everything fell apart, Maya and I drove to Starved Rock State Park, about 90 minutes southwest of Chicago. We hiked to Wildcat Canyon, stood at the overlook watching the Illinois River wind through the trees. "I'm not angry anymore," Maya said quietly. "At her, at what happened. I'm just sad for her, that she couldn't see what she had." I pulled her into a side hug. "You're wiser than most adults, you know that. I get it from you." We stood there watching the river for a while longer, then headed back down the trail. On the drive home, Maya fell asleep in the passenger seat, her head against the window, and I thought about the promise I'd made to Lauren all those years ago. I'd kept it, even when the promise turned out to be a lie. Even when the person I'd promised no longer existed or maybe never had, I'd kept my word. That said something about who I was, not something shameful, something honorable. But I'd also learned that blind loyalty, without questions, without boundaries, without self-preservation, wasn't love. It was self-destruction, masquerading as virtue. The real promise, the one that mattered, was the one I'd never said out loud, but lived every day. To be present for my daughter. To show her what real love looked like. To teach her that people who truly love you don't ask you to sacrifice yourself completely. That's the promise I'll keep for the rest of my life. Not because someone made me swear it on their deathbed, but because it's the right thing to do. And unlike some promises, It's one I'm honored to keep. The end.